Welcome to week 10 of the summer 2025 database-driven web development course. I'm Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. This week we'll have an opportunity kind of to catch up a little bit. It's going to be a light week. You know, there's some students are a little bit behind in some areas, so kind of opportunity to get caught up before the kind of final sprint to the end, so to speak. So this week we have the lab.0501, which is once we get into this will be React. So we'll be doing a lot more of the front end type stuff for the React. And I'll go ahead and do a presentation tomorrow on that. And then also the lab itself has a couple videos within the lab, embedded in the lab. That Mr. Gudmanstead did, so I'm not going to redo that. So I guess you guys can use that. So after that, for the rest of basically the rest of this course, these are the assignments that's left in this course. You'll basically have 3 labs after this week's one. After this week's one, you'll have 3 more labs and 1 more hot and your final project. So time flies and won't be long. We'll be finishing things up. So as far as today's concerned, what I kind of wanted to do is spend a little bit of time going through kind of the status of the final project, where a lot of the students are at this point. And, you know, this has been a accumulation of different labs. But I just kind of wanted to go through a few different things on that. And just areas where I feel like maybe what wasn't addressed. And some of these areas I didn't necessarily take points off of, but it's going to be best for you to get that fixed up, because it's going to make it a lot easier, because a lot of this is going to be used for the final project. And if you got things not working well before then, it's just going to make things more difficult for you. So let's go ahead and look some code here. So let's see. I want to look at the register event here, and you may have called yours different. This one's just register, and some students call things a little bit different, which is fine. I just adjust when I'm testing, when I'm grading your assignments. I just adjust, the different routes based on. Basically from Postman, what I'm trying to say here. So in the register route, one of the things that actually it's kind of expected here, and we've kind of changed, right? Things morph. And I know at one point, a lab might say do one thing, then later on it's kind of doing something a little different. So in this case, basically when you come in here to register, the register set up that any user, any person, they're not even a user yet, any person can come in and create a new account, right? That's the kind of the gist of that. Now on that though, what you're wanting to be able to do is, an important part is it really shouldn't have a role. So in reality, you probably actually should just kind of get rid of your role. Let's see this register scheme on this one. So here, you could just kind of get rid of this altogether or make this optional, but really a user shouldn't be able to actually put that in, right? They shouldn't actually be able to put in a role. So I would just actually get rid of that. I would actually get rid of that. I kind of deleted too much stuff there when I wanted to. All right. I would actually get rid of that. And I'm going to get rid of this role. Well, let's see here. Yeah, we can get rid of the role here. We won't be passing it in. And probably what you kind of want to do here is maybe just like create one, just kind of a placeholder one. And instead of, I think in one of the labs is say to put developer, that's fine, but I don't think that's actually like in the real world type situation. You really wouldn't want to automatically assign some kind of a role that may not be relevant at all. So you can just kind of put in a placeholder or something like that if you'd like. Let me see what I'm doing here. So you could just put in a placeholder or something like that, right? And so then when you went ahead and created this, a user would come, a person would come in, create their own, register their own account. And then later on, a technical manager would have to come in and go ahead and update that user to assign a role. So that's kind of really the plan for this, for the register event, how this really should be kind of working. Okay. So let me go ahead and bring a postman here. Make sure I didn't break anything in the process. Okay, so what I do here on register. Okay, so register. Yep, there's nothing here to prevent you from creating one. You don't have to be authorized on anything. So I should just be able to come in here. I think my server's running and everything. So I created this other user. Before I do this, let's just go look at the database real quick. And I want to talk about that here in a little bit. So I've got some users here. Let me see. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically one for each role, I believe. Well, this one has a null role. And I know that's kind of changed as well. And so you might have used different. Now you can go ahead as far as roles are concerned. If you want to have additional roles, that's fine. But really you need to at least have those base roles because a lot of that logic on those permissions are based on those roles. And if you wanted to add additional roles as well, that is fine. But those base roles that were already kind of defined in the lab, you kind of need to have those, which is basically developer, business analyst, quality analyst, product manager, and technical manager. And to be honest, it's probably best one of them to actually create early on is the technical manager, because the technical manager can edit everything, can delete things. So it's good to have that role set up that way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and send this. Let's see. Okay, user registered, got an auth token and all of that. Obviously won't have any permissions because it don't have any, nothing's going to be linked to that. Let me go back here to Mongo. And let me look at the users here. Let me refresh. So here's this role of user, which user really doesn't associate to anything. So it's just a role that doesn't really associate. It's a placeholder type one. Okay, so we have this Larry Johnson, and how we really kind of want to do this is, so let's see what we need to do. We need the object ID for this guy. Don't we do that? Let me see how we do how do we do an edit here? We want to patch the user. And I might have to change a couple things. I think what port we're using on this app here. Different students sometimes use different ports. This one's 2025, so I need to change that. And then let me see on our index, got API user. Okay, so this one should work then. Okay, so we're updating this. I want to get rid of all of these. And then, okay, so let's see. Before I update this, what I need to do is I need to come in and log in as the technical manager, right? I'm just kind of showing you how the flow to this should really be going. So user comes in and can create their own account. It's automatically, and in this case, I made it where it's automatically just going to be the user role. And then what's going to have to happen is a technical manager is going to have to come in here and update that role. Okay, So I am going to log in as him. And let's go find him real quick. And he's the technical manager, is right here. And here's his email. I make all my passwords the same. So you really should be doing that, right? It's easier for testing purposes, though. So here, I'm going to go ahead and log in with this technical manager. And now I've got this technical manager role. Okay. Now he has that. Let's see what the cookies are here. I probably should have gotten rid of it. Let me just get rid of that for now. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and log in again. So he should have all his roles and everything in here. Yeah, merge permissions. Yes, looks good here. Okay, so obviously he can edit any user, right? So now I should be able to go over here to this user ID. This is that new one I created, that Larry guy. Which one am I doing? I think I need to patch the user. Let me make sure I'm using the right thing here. So for patching, okay, we got that one. Login, that's me. Patch user ID, okay. So can't edit any user. So this should be good because this is the technical manager. And now this technical manager is going to go ahead and just set this one to developer. Let's hit send here, see if that works. Okay, that looks good. User updated successfully. If I look at my data now, I should see, let me hit the refresh. And now this Larry Johnson that I created today has the role of developer. Okay, so that was, that's just kind of the flow of how that should work. And, obviously, it's going to make a much more of a difference when we have a front end and stuff like that. Okay, because a technical manager is going to come in, click some things based on that. That's what they're going to be able to do, right? Okay, let's see. And, it's always important besides updating users, adding those roles. Also, the technical manager can delete as well. All right, roles and permissions. So I just wanted to kind of mention this because, there's a little bit of confusion on this before. So there's these, you should basically have a role. You should have a user created for every role, right? At least one created for each role. That way you can test these different scenarios. That's the only way you can test these things. And, many students really didn't have that. And that's okay. I know, this is a lot to understand and get going with. But, you do need to get to a point where you've got a user for each role so you can test those different scenarios. Now, another thing is you have to remember either you have kind of really two choices here. And you have to either make sure you have everything the case right. So if you're in Postman and you've got a role and you've got it camel case and your schema doesn't, the schema role in the schema and from Postman and from Postman into the schema and then into the database needs to have the same role, uppercase, lowercase, needs to have the same case is what I'm saying. If you've got a camel case, it's got to be the same. And actually it is always important really to do this in the real world, to always just make everything lowercase or everything uppercase when you're comparing, right? So that way you don't have to worry about that. But, I'm just kind of mentioning, just because there's some scenarios where some students had, maybe, capital Q for quality analyst and capital A, and things weren't working, is because it was different than in the schema or different than what's being passed in from Postman, right? So it all has to match up. All right. And also, yeah, and another place is the hasPermissions. So, you need to make sure that this is the correct case. Is it, however you put this in your roles database, it has to be the same, right? So let's go look at the roles here. Yeah, and where else it has to match kind of multiple places with the roles. Um, so let's look at this one. And so I already said it has to match. As far as the roles itself, has to match what's in Postman. It needs to match what's in the schema. It needs to match what's in your user, each user object, each user document, and also it has to match what's in here as far as case is concerned. Right? Them all have to match. So there's like 4 different places, right? And then obviously in your hasPermissions, it has to match this, right? It has to match all of one of these. The only other place where this is would also be if you're using the has role from the auth permissions, you're using has role, so that has to match also the case, right? So that, or like I said, you can also make sure that you change everything lowercase or uppercase just to deal with that as well. All right. Some other things I wanted to point out. So this student, did a good job on this error messaging for the most part, and I've just seen a little bit of inconsistency from different students, even in the same file, they're doing different things. Just obviously, if something's not found, it's going to be a 404, right? Let me pull up that real quick. I might have closed that off. Let me get some messages here. So the different status codes, obviously. So basically, if something's not found, like you have some kind of a lookup. Some of the routes ask you to go ahead and look up to see if it's in a database first before you do anything. That's kind of best practice. You don't try to go just because you've got a passed in data. You don't just assume that record, it may be an update, but you don't assume that that's a valid record, right? So first you need to check. You should be checking if it's a valid record. And in some of the routes, it explicitly states to first check, do you do a lookup, make sure it's valid, right? So if it's not found, you should be doing a 404 error on those, right? If the user's not logged in, you should be doing a 401, okay? And then also a bad request, you're sending in bad data, maybe from Postman, and obviously when we have a front end, someone sends in bad data, you're going to go ahead and do a 400 on those, right? And the other one is usually an internal server error. So them are the common ones we're kind of using. A bad request, unauthorized. I think it did ask you to do forbidden at some point, but it's not a big deal. Okay, but 404 is important. Unauthorized, basically can't log in, right? If you're not logged in, you're unauthorized. Or even if it's you're unauthorized if you got the wrong role, right? If you don't have a role to that, that could be forbidden. Understands request. We're using authorized access. You're forbidden to access that because you don't have permissions to access that, right? Authorized from logging in, yeah. So 403 would be more for like if you can edit any user. If you don't have can edit any user, that's almost a forbidden, right? Okay, and then obviously the internal server error. So these look good. I did want to mention something else in here. One thing that I would make sure you do is, messages like the 200, these are just your own user kind of created message. But whenever you're having error, you don't know what the error is. This is going to say internal server error, and this is not going to help you with debugging at all. So here you're better off doing you're better off doing error.message, or just like that. So then, depending on what the error is, you'll go ahead and get the message on what that error is. That's an important one. Let's see what else. Okay. The student, did right here. I've seen some where some students were passing different things. You need to be passing the EAuth, not the EAuth, the auth. I'm saying EAuth because that was actually some job I worked at. The authentication was called EAuth, so that's where I came up with that at. But you need to send the authentication from the request object in on your add edit, right? And some of the students had different things here as far as if it's an update, this needs to be update. If it's a insert, it needs to say insert. And here, this student has the updated fields, which he's sending in. There was some students were actually just sending in the whole object. They had some situations where they're sending in the whole object on first they checked to see if it was if they had one, and then they end up using this whole object on a lookup and sending that in. You really only want to send in the updated fields, right? On an edit, you don't want to send in everything, only what was updated. What else did I want to talk about here? Okay, database. So all of these have functions that you're calling to update, like update user. Now, I've noticed multiple students did have where they were actually calling the database functions from within their routes. And I'll tell you, kind of the reason it's best not to do that is because it's the whole idea to have, it's called kind of separation of concerns. So you should really be using a database, something where you've got all your database logic in to update those, to update things in a database. And so the reason for that is, one of the reasons, well, one, it's in one place, so that if you wanted to go and, you're doing something and you wanted to get something again, you know where to go one place to see it, right? So, I need to do this in some other file, then you can go ahead and just grab that one. It's already there. If you do it, only in that file, the route, then it's only good for that route, in that route. But the whole idea of separation of concerns is you can go ahead, in this case, let's say you just created you created an object and you're basically sending this object in to update user, right? But this isn't saying, nothing here is actually saying, hey, this is a Mongo database, right? This is just sending in this data. So in your database file, what if you end up saying, you know what, we're not going to use Mongo database anymore. We're going to use SQL Server. We're going to use MySQL, Postgres, or one of the other servers, right? Or, one of the other databases. So that way you can change things within here without having to, otherwise you're going to have to go into each one of these other files to change it, right? For all your database calls. It's better to have a generic function that you're calling. I don't want to say generic function, but a basic JavaScript function you're calling instead of a Mongo related one, right? Where your Mongo related logic will be in your database file. Okay. Hope that makes sense. Just really one more thing I wanted to go over here. So first, I'm going to go ahead. I wanted to show you how to use the debugger, and it can be kind of tricky, and it can be a little bit of confusing. But you get used to it. It's especially when you at some point in time, you're going to run across some problem and you're not going to know what to do about it. Um, and and you know, with a debugger, you can really drill down and find out what's going on. So let me go and show you how to do that. So if you just go, you know, you're in your root directory, as long as you're in your root directory, right? And then you can go in here and do an add configuration, okay? And you want to choose node.js, okay? You're selecting a debugger, node.js. Okay, it's going to bring up this file. Now, if you try to run this, it's not, it'll do something, but it's not really what you want. And that's because within our package.json file, let me bring this, let me do this up here. Within our package.json file, you know, we're using nodemon, we're using .env. So we have to kind of refer to that within our launch so that everything works the same way as if we weren't using kind of the debugger. Okay. So it's automatically going to create this launch.json when I selected the debugger node.js. But we're going to go ahead and replace this. And I'll go ahead and send you an email on what you need to put in there. I'm just going to grab it from over here. Different editor I have. And so here's that. I think I'm missing one thing here. Yep. All right. So here you're actually, and you don't have to worry about what all this means. I'll send this to you. This should work as long as you've pretty much doing the same thing here for your start environment. And as long as everything's in, you know, this is in your root directory, your VS Code here, this launch is in the root directory of, okay, then it should work fine. Okay. So let me go back to that. So this should work fine for that. You shouldn't even have to make any changes unless you called something different. So now what you can kind of go ahead and come in here and do. One thing you also want to make sure you do is go ahead and if you have a server running, you want to make sure that you have that, you stop your server, stop your server, make sure you don't, might have something open in another window too if you have multiple Visual Studio codes open. So make sure your servers are off, right? Closed, not running. Okay, and then here, basically all you can kind of do is you can hit the F5 key right here. You can just go hit F5 key, and that will start up. So basically, it's going to kind of look very much the same as you did before, right? The only thing I don't like is this thing sometimes in your way if you have files underneath there, right? But fortunately, we're over here, so we're good with that. So I just want to kind of show you how this can work for you. Let me find a route here that we're going to do. Yeah, we could do the login one, why not? So, and here you want to put a breakpoint. So here I'm just putting a breakpoint right here at this one. And this is something you want to play with. And I know there's a lot here, and especially when you see how big some of these objects are, you'd be surprised at how JavaScript wraps. All your stuff is wrapped in something else, and Express, and all these frameworks. So it can be a little overwhelming. But if you can kind of learn how to do at least some small little things, it could really help you with debugging some scenarios. Okay. So here we're just doing a login, so I should be ready. I should have that code ready to. Our Postman ready to do that. Let me go ahead and come in here. We're going to go to login. We're already logged in, but here, let's get rid of the cookies. Why not? Let's clear all our cookies. And I'm going to hit send here. Okay, and obviously it's just kind of running because that's because the debugger actually stopped it, right? So you come in here, right? And as of right now, so you can hover over things. You can see there's the email, there's the password, right? You just have to learn these different things. This is to continue, right? Or you can hit the F5 key. This one is to step over, step into, and you'll see when you step into is usually when you're calling a different function. And then when you're in, you want to go into that function, right? It'll go ahead and step into. A lot of times you can do step over, okay? Step out. That's if you're in a function and you're like, okay, I'm getting too deep in here. I just want to get out of here. And then obviously you've got this where you can just stop this. You click this and it'll stop the debugging altogether. Okay. But here's that. I'm going to go ahead and just hit step over. So it's just going to go to the next line here. And then obviously you hovered over here and there's Jack Johnson and here's the password. So, these are very, and another thing is like you can do, right click on this and do add to watch. Come down here, add to watch. Or you can just come over here where you got the watch and click this and you can just type in REQ. And this is going to be this big long request object though. And, this is where things can be kind of confusing, right? So you got, you kind of want to keep things simple for yourself. But, just like this here in itself, you can do this. And then there's the body. And so that's just showing you the body of your request, right? It's showing you what's being passed in. And then if you hit step over again, it's going to go to the next line and it's going to kind of keep stepping over. But maybe here, well, I want to step into this one, right? I want to step into this one, get user by email. And it's going to go into your database function. Now you're in here, right? So this can be very handy for different things, okay? This is one we want to go ahead and step out of this. So now we're back here. This already ran. And one thing too, and here's your user. This is the user that came back from the database. So you could just hover over that, or, sometimes you want to watch things and you might have a few different watches. So like here, you could just type in user here. And then here's your whole user object, right? You can see everything. So sometimes, when you're having a problem with something, this can be very handy. Okay, very handy. Now, sometimes you got to watch when you do have this in a debug mode, especially because like Mongo's going to have some timeout functions. So if you wait it a little too long, it might time out that call, and then you just kind of have to do it again. So, I'm sitting here for a long time here, but you generally don't want to sit, too long on something because it will time out in certain circumstances, right? So step over. Here's your auth token, right? You can hover over these things. Here's back to your user. There's user object. So, if like something's null, something doesn't have a value, you can kind of figure out what's going on, right? Let's say, sometimes people end up calling this wrong. They don't have the underscore. They just do user.id. And I wonder why it's not working, right? Because that's one that's easy to make that mistake, right? So if it doesn't have a value, something's wrong. I don't know why that did that one. That was a little strange for me. Oh, it's how I did it. No, it didn't. It didn't make a difference. All right. That's all right. But, this is going to be very handy. I'll go ahead and send you this file. So you can go ahead and do that. And let me just kind of show you that one more time. So this is the debug mode. There's also, you can come up here and do start debugging as well. Once you have, see, I already killed the server here, right? Yep. So the server's gone. Should be able to just go up here also, and you can either hit F5. It's the same as hitting F5, right? Start debugging. So, and obviously you've got this up. To get rid of this, you just come over here and collect your Explorer, and you're back to here. But just real quick here, let me go ahead and delete this. So I can show you how to start this again just one more time. Move to the recycling bin. Okay, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do add configuration. And I want to say and select debugger. I want the node.js one. It's creating this file. And I'm going to just copy this one I have, which I will send you. All right. And that's it. And like I said, as long as you got your package.json file, you have the nodeman and .env, and you're using index.js. If you call your server.js or something, then this is going to have to be different. You know, this will have to be server.js, right? But as long as you pretty much have this the same as your package.json on your start dev, you should be good. And then once you have this here, and like I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure you have your servers, you don't have any servers running, so make sure they're off. And then here you just come in here and hit, you can either go to run, start debugging, or hit F5, and boom, it's running in debug mode now. Okay. And basically the easiest way, it doesn't matter, you can come in here and you can do the same thing. You can kill it, it'll also kill that little, you know, your controls as well. So either that or you click that little red thing to get rid of that. Like I said, the only thing is kind of a bummer sometimes. Maybe there's a way to move that around. I don't know. I've never figured that out, but sometimes it's in the way of one of your files, right? Sometimes you have to mess with that if you're, you know, I've had it over a file I was trying to look at. So, you know, I hope this can, you know, come in handy for you. Obviously, it's really good for hovering over things. Sometimes, like I said, you try to look at the request object or response object. Them are wrapped in so many different things, and especially when using frameworks. But you know, certain things, it's really easy to, you know, to see. Something to play with a little bit. It's going to come in very handy for you, especially when you some little scenario where you know you don't know what's going on, and you know, no matter what you do, you try to print it out, you know what's going on. So, you know, it's very helpful in those situations. So that's all I have for today. And like I said, I'll go ahead and send you the debug, what you need to do to launch the debugger. And tomorrow we'll go ahead and go start working on the React side of things, start working on that front end part. So, all right, have a good day.